I'm just really interested in my background in Punjab and learning a bit more, and I feel like there would be people wanting to learn a bit more about Punjab and their background, especially if they're born in Canada, UK, US. So I figured I always wanted to make a YouTube video, so I picked up this book when I was studying at university called The History of the Sikhs by Kushwant Singh, which seemed really interesting. And it gave a really nice background and then into Sikhism and then after the gurus, etc. Because you always learn a bit about Sikhism and like after Guru Nanak, etc. It's nice if you learn a bit about before the prehistory, before that, the geography, how Punjab came into being, how the language and culture came, and then leading up to the religion, what was the conditions there. So I thought to share that. So let's just start from the beginning. So in the beginning, around 35 million years ago, the Indian subcontinent collided with the Eurasia plate, creating vast mountain ranges. And the Punjab is geographically distinct from the rest of the subcontinent because it's shaped in a scalene triangle, and the shortest side is to the north, composed of the massive Himalayas which separate it from the Tibetan plateau, and then the western side is bounded by the river Indus, where it flows down to meet Punjab's rivers at a place called Panjnad, or Five Streams. And then west of the Indus runs a chain of rugged mountains, and they're called the Hindu Kush and the Suleiman. These mountains to the west have several passes that you might know of. For example, Khyber Pass, which was very important in shaping Punjab's history because it served as inlets for the people of Afghanistan and beyond that. The Punjab, except for the salt ranges in its centre, is actually an extensive plain, sloping gently down from the mountains in the north and the west towards the desert in the south. Across this flat land flow 6 large rivers: the Indus, Jhelum, Janab, Ravi, Beas and Sutlej. And in the tracts, or they're called doabs, between these rivers live communities who describe themselves as Punjabi, the people of Punjab. So that really gives a nice history behind the geography and how Punjab was made up of. And then you can kind of tell it's rich in resources and why it started to attract people in the sort of prehistory or in the ancient era. So when the Aryans from the west first came to India, there were 7 rivers in Punjab, so they named it Sapta Sindhva, the land of 7 seas. And then the Persians later on took the name from the Aryans and called it Hafta Hindva. But then, sometime later, the 7th river actually dried up, the Saraswati. Then people just excluded Indus River as well because it only marked the western boundary of the province. So the whole region was renamed after the remaining 5 rivers. So Panj meaning 5 and Ab meaning rivers in Persian. So that just gives the name today, Punjab, or the land of 5 rivers. So the climate of this fertile area of land ranges from cold in the winter to scorching heat in the summer. And these temperature extremes and the 2 monsoons produce a variety of seasons and a constantly changing landscape. Spring is actually ushered in the early month of February, and it's Punjab's blossom time, the best time to visit, when, in the words of Guru Nanak, he said, "All is seemly, the woodlands are in flower, and loud with the humming of bumblebees. The countryside is an expanse of mustard yellow, broken by solid squares of green sugarcane. If the winter monsoon has been good, a crop of wheat, barley, gram, oilseeds and tobacco will cover the land with lush abundance." It really gives a good idea of the colourful environment of Punjab and sort of why this culture started to develop. So with the coming of spring, the peasants that lived there would wind brightly coloured turbans around their heads, put waistcoats covered with pearl buttons on, tie bells around their ankles and dance the Bhangra to the beat of the drum. So this simple folk music originated by farmers just performing moves on the spot to finish their job in a pleasurable way. But this sort of simple dance would later be infused with a martial dance called Gatka to defend the very fields it originated from. And as we know, Bhangra would later heavily influence the Bollywood film industry scene and music around the world for years to come. So it's kind of nice to know where that background and simple origins came from. But there was little rest for the peasants because cotton was to be picked and the land ploughed again for sowing wheat and gram. In fact, in modern times, the Indian Punjab is often referred to as the granary of India because it provides 20% of India's wheat, 9% of India's rice, and globally it's kind of surprising. It represents 2% of the world's cotton, 2% of its wheat, and 1% of its rice. So as we can see that Punjab is a very fertile land, and in terms of the story, it attracts many communities and races for the years to come.